Sign it, Aaliyah. We're doing this to save you from prison. My father shoved a pen into my hand, his voice dripping with fake concern. You are clearly unfit to manage your own life. I tried to pull away, but my arms felt like lead. The tea. They had put something in the tea. Across the table, my brother Tyler checked his watch and smirked. That's when the truth hit me harder than the drugs. They weren't trying to help me through a mental breakdown. They were staging one. They wanted my signature to steal my company and cover their own crimes. So I did the only thing I could. I let my hand go limp, dropped the pen, and slammed my head onto the table, feigning a total blackout. They thought I was unconscious, but I was wide awake. And I was listening. Tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted a family member, only to realize they were plotting your downfall the entire time? I want to hear your story. I dragged myself across the cold tile of the bathroom floor and locked the door. My hands were shaking, but my mind was a steel trap. They thought I was unconscious in the dining room, but I had managed to stumble in here, claiming I was going to be sick, which wasn't a lie. The diazepam was making the room spin, but adrenaline is a powerful antidote. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at the woman in the mirror. They saw a victim. They saw a broken daughter. They had no idea who was really looking back at them. You see, I don't just do taxes. I own Validus Analytics. I am a forensic accountant. I spend my days hunting down money that people try very hard to hide. I've audited cartels, exposed Ponzi schemes, and found assets buried under 6 layers of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. I know how to track a lie through a labyrinth of numbers. My entire career is built on seeing what people are desperate to keep hidden. But looking at my reflection, I realized the cruelest joke of all. I could spot an embezzler from a mile away, but I couldn't see the predators sitting at my own kitchen table. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and I was just too busy paying the bills to notice. Growing up, the dynamic was always the same. Tyler was the sun, and I was just the gravity that kept him from flying off into space. He was the golden child, the dreamer, the entrepreneur who was always one big idea away from greatness. I was the help, the reliable one, the one who didn't need praise because I was expected to function without it. When Tyler crashed his car at 19, my father Douglas didn't ask him to get a job to pay for the damages. He asked me to dip into my college fund because Tyler is going through a hard time. I paid it. When Tyler's first startup, an artisanal coffee subscription that never delivered a single bean, imploded, my mother Cynthia didn't tell him to file for bankruptcy. She guilted me into covering his rent for a year because he's your brother, Aaliyah, and family supports family. I supported him. I supported all of them. While Tyler was playing CEO with my money, I was building Validus from the ground up. I worked 80-hour weeks, sleeping under my desk, eating vending machine dinners, and staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. I didn't take vacations. I didn't buy fancy cars. I reinvested everything into my firm, and when I finally made my first million, my parents didn't congratulate me. They just asked for a loan. They looked at my success and saw a bank account. I looked at their failures and saw a liability I couldn't write off. I spent years convincing myself that if I just gave enough, if I just fixed enough of Tyler's messes, they would finally value me. I thought I was buying their love. I didn't realize I was just financing my own destruction. I gripped the edge of the sink, the cold porcelain grounding me. They thought they were dealing with the sister who wrote checks to keep the peace. They thought they were dealing with the daughter who craved their approval. But that woman died the moment that pen hit the table. The person in this bathroom wasn't their daughter anymore. She was the auditor. And she was about to close the books on this family for good. 2 weeks ago, the war didn't start with a scream. It started with a spreadsheet. My parents had practically begged me to look at the books for Tyler's latest venture, a boutique property management firm called Elite Havens. They claimed he was overwhelmed by his own success. They wanted me to optimize his tax strategy. It took me less than 10 minutes to realize there was no strategy to optimize. There was only theft. I sat in my office, staring at a variance that made my stomach turn. A $185,000 hole in the client escrow account. Tyler hadn't just mismanaged profits. He had drained the down payments of 3 different families to fund his online gambling addiction. This wasn't just bad business. It was wire fraud. It was embezzlement. It was federal prison time. I drove to my parents' house that night, the printed ledgers burning a hole in my passenger seat. I thought I was bringing them a warning. I thought we would sit down, figure out how to sell Tyler's car, maybe mortgage their house, anything to pay the money back before the clients noticed. I thought we were on the same team. I was wrong. When I laid the proof on the coffee table, Tyler didn't deny it. He just slumped on the sofa, burying his face in his hands, performing the role of the tortured soul perfectly. But my parents? They didn't look at Tyler with anger. They looked at me with cold, hard fury. Why were you digging that deep? My mother snapped. pushing the papers away like they were contaminated. We asked you to help him with taxes, not launch an inquisition. I didn't dig, Mom. It was gone. The money is gone, I tried to explain, my voice rising. He stole from clients. If he doesn't put that money back by the end of the quarter, he's going to jail. My father stood up, towering over me. Nobody is going to jail, Aaliyah. You're overreacting. You always have to be the smartest person in the room, don't you? You always have to make your brother look small. That was the moment the ground shifted. They weren't horrified by the crime. They were inconvenienced by the witness. They sent me home, telling me they would handle it. I didn't sleep for days, waiting for them to call, to ask for a loan, to do something rational. Instead, they invited me to a wellness dinner, standing in the bathroom, gripping the cold porcelain. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The diazepam. The intervention. The power of attorney. They weren't poisoning me to kill me. Dead bodies trigger autopsies, and autopsies trigger homicide investigations. They needed something cleaner. They needed me alive, but discredited. If I was drugged, stumbling, slurring my words, and acting paranoid, I looked unstable. If they could get a doctor to sign off on a psychotic break, they could get an emergency conservatorship. They would gain control of Validus Analytics. They would have access to my corporate accounts. They could take my liquid assets, money I earned, finding criminals, and use it to refill Tyler's escrow account. And the cherry on top? If the missing money was ever discovered later, they could blame the crazy accountant's sister who had a breakdown and messed up the books. They were going to frame me to save him. I looked at the door. Beyond it, my family was waiting for the drug to finish the job. They expected a victim to walk out. But they forgot the first rule of forensic accounting. Follow the incentive. I knew exactly what they wanted, and I knew exactly how to use it to bury them. I unlocked the bathroom door. The room was still spinning, but my resolve was absolute. I wasn't going to let them commit me. I was going to let them commit a felony. I stumbled out of the bathroom, clutching the doorframe for support. My performance had to be flawless. I walked back into the dining room, my eyes unfocused. My speech slurred just enough to sell the lie. I can't think, I mumbled, swaying slightly. I feel sick. I need to go home. I'll sign everything in the morning. Just let me sleep. Douglas exchanged a look with Cynthia. I could see the calculation in their eyes. They had the power of attorney ready. But if I signed it while visibly drugged, a judge might throw it out later. They needed me compliant, but conscious enough to make it stick. Go home, Aaliyah, my mother said, her voice dripping with that same fake sympathy. Rest. We'll meet at your office at 9 sharp. Don't make us wait. They let me walk out the door because they were arrogant. They thought the diazepam had already won. They thought they were watching a broken woman retreat to her bed to surrender. They didn't know I was calling an Uber to the nearest emergency room. The ride was a blur of nausea and city lights. But when I walked into the ER, I didn't sit in the waiting area. I walked straight to the triage nurse, gripping the counter to keep my hands steady. She looked up, ready to ask for my insurance card, but I cut her off. I am a forensic auditor involved in a high-stakes litigation case, I said, my voice low and lethal. I have reason to believe I have been chemically partially sedated to coerce a signature on a legal document. I need a full toxicology panel drawn immediately to establish a legal chain of custody. If you do not secure this evidence now, this hospital could be liable for spoliation of evidence in a felony fraud investigation. The nurse stopped typing. She looked at my dilated pupils, then at the steel in my eyes. She didn't ask me to take a seat. She picked up the phone and paged the on-call physician. Within 20 minutes, my blood was in a vial, labeled, sealed, and time-stamped. I wasn't just a patient. I was a crime scene. And I had just secured the evidence that would put my parents in prison. But I wasn't done. Prison was the long game. I needed to destroy their ability to fight back first. I took another car to my office. The building was dark, the silence of the empty floor comforting. I made a pot of black coffee and sat at my desk, the glow of my monitors cutting through the gloom. This was my arena. This was where I hunted. I opened a new file and began to draft the most important document of my career. I titled it, The Liability Assumption and Asset Transfer Agreement. To the untrained eye, it looked like a surrender. It listed my company, my intellectual property, and my accounts as assets being transferred to the Reynolds Family Trust. It looked like I was giving them everything they wanted, but I wasn't writing a transfer. I was writing a trap. I pulled a black USB drive from my drawer. I loaded it with a single encrypted file named Ledger. V2 DAT. It looked impressive. It looked like a digital vault key. I would tell them it held $500,000 in untaxed cryptocurrency, my escape fund that I was too terrified to declare to the IRS. It was a lie. The drive was empty. But it was the perfect bait. I sat back, spinning the USB drive between my fingers. Why would seasoned con artists like my parents fall for such an obvious trap? Why would they sign a 50-page contract without reading the fine print? Here is the thing about narcissists. They have a blind spot the size of a continent. It's called the greed override. A predator will never look at the fine print if the headline promises them free money. I didn't need to outsmart them. I just needed to feed their greed until they choked. They believed I was weak. They believed I was hiding money because that's exactly what they would do. I wasn't tricking them. I was simply confirming their own bias. They were so desperate to believe they had won, they would sign their own death warrants just to hold the pen. I printed the document. 52 pages of dense legal text. I placed the USB drive on top of it. It was 4 a.m. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the rats. The next morning, the conference room at Validus Analytics felt less like an office and more like an operating theater. The air conditioning was set to 65 degrees. The glass walls were frosted. In the center of the table sat a stack of 52 pages, bound in a thick leather folder. Next to it lay the black USB drive. Sarah, my office manager and a court-certified notary, sat at the head of the table. She knew her role. Witness the signatures, stamp the documents, and say absolutely nothing until I gave the signal. I sat opposite her, wearing oversized sunglasses to hide the fact that my eyes were clear and sharp. I tapped my foot incessantly against the floor, a nervous tick I had practiced in the mirror. When the elevator doors opened, I didn't look up. Douglas, Cynthia, and Tyler walked in like they owned the building. They probably thought they already did. My father was wearing his closer suit navy blue. Silk tie, the uniform of a man who thinks he's about to win a negotiation. Tyler looked hungover but eager, his eyes immediately darting to the USB drive on the table. "Aaliyah," my mother said, her voice dropping into that familiar, suffocating register of concern. "We were so worried. You look terrible, honey." I didn't sleep," I stammered, my voice pitched high and tight. "I think they're watching me. The auditors." I stood up too quickly, grabbing the back of the chair for support. It was a nice touch. Douglas exchanged a glance with Tyler, a look of pure, predatory satisfaction. They thought the paranoia was a side effect of the withdrawal or the breakdown. They didn't realize it was the bait. "We're here to help, Aaliyah," Douglas said, pulling out a chair. "Just like we promised. We'll take the burden off your shoulders." "It's worse than I told you," I whispered, leaning over the table. I picked up the USB drive, my hand trembling just enough to sell the fear. "There's $500,000 on this drive. Untaxed cryptocurrency. I skimmed it off the top of my biggest contracts 3 years ago. I thought I could hide it. But the IRS algorithms, they flagged the transfers." Tyler's eyes practically fell out of his head. 500,000? "Yes. But the freeze order kicks in at 10 o'clock, I said, checking my watch. It was 3 minutes to 10. "We have 3 minutes. If these assets aren't transferred out of my name and into the trust before that clock hits 10, they seize everything. The crypto, the company, the house. I go to prison for tax evasion." I shoved the stack of papers toward them. "This transfers Validus and all its assets to you. It gives you the crypto key. It puts everything in your name so the IRS can't touch me. Just sign the indemnity waiver. Please. I just want to be safe." It was the perfect storm of manipulation. I gave them a prize, $500,000 in free money. I gave them a threat, the ticking clock. And I gave them a solution, signing a piece of paper they didn't have time to read. Douglas didn't even look at the text. He looked at the USB drive, then at the clock. The greed override kicked in, bypassing every logical circuit in his brain. "We'll protect you, Aaliyah," he said, uncapping his pen. "We'll take care of everything." He reached for the contract. He didn't see a legal document. He saw a winning lottery ticket, and he was about to sign his life away to cash it. Douglas didn't just sign the papers. He flourished the pen. He attacked the signature line with the arrogance of a man who thought he was carving his initials into a trophy. "There," he said, sliding the heavy binder toward Tyler. "We're doing this because we love you, Aaliyah. We'll take care of this burden. You just focus on getting better." It was the ultimate lie, masking theft as charity, disguising greed as parental sacrifice. It was the same lie he'd told me when I paid his mortgage. The same lie he'd told when I bailed Tyler out of jail. But this time, the lie was legally binding. Tyler signed next, his hand shaking. Not with fear, but with anticipation. He was already spending the $500,000 in his head. Cynthia signed last, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the heartbroken mother to the very end. Then came the sound I had been waiting for. Thump, thump, thump. Sarah stamped the final document. The transfer was complete. The liability was permanent. I removed my sunglasses and spoke calmly. Thank you. You can stop pretending now. The ink is dry. The room froze. I slid the USB drive to Tyler. Go ahead. Plug it in. It's empty, he whispered. Where's the crypto? There is no crypto. I follow the law. Douglas tried to stand. You lied. Sit down, I said. You didn't read what you signed. I opened the contract. You assumed full legal liability for all debts of Validus and its subsidiaries. Their faces drained. 2 weeks ago, I acquired Tyler's company as a subsidiary. It came with a $185,000 deficit. You didn't steal my money. You legally took my debt. You now personally owe that money. Douglas lunged for the documents. Sarah removed them immediately. You tricked us, Tyler shouted. It's a contract, I said. And you admitted controlling the accounts. Douglas screamed at me. I felt nothing. He was no longer my father, just a bad investment I had liquidated. I pressed the intercom. Send them in. 2 financial crimes detectives entered, with a warrant for Tyler. I picked up my bag and walked out without looking back. The consequences were swift. My parents were forced to sell everything to repay the debt and avoid charges. Tyler pled guilty to wire fraud and is now serving time. As for me, I kept my life. Now I sit in my home, drinking tea I brewed myself. It tastes like peace. You can't con an auditor.